LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the February 18th edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I picked out the weekend's 10 best, most newsworthy clips for what should be a really educational, informative, fair use media criticism and political analysis show for you all tonight. The political comedy source for tonight's show will be the monologue from HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher last Friday night. But as usual, most of my clips come from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States. The big topic I'll be covering this weekend will be the widening Russia scandal that the Trump administration is getting further and further into with the Mueller indictment on Friday. There'll be some tangential references to the shooting in Florida, which was, of course, another big topic on the Sunday morning news analysis shows. There was also a little coverage of the death of immigration reform, but I won't have much coverage of that. But I will, like I said, cover very deeply and concretely the Mueller indictment. In fact, if you want to read the entire Mueller indictment for yourself, all 37 pages, there's a link down in the video description. Also down there, you'll see a link to my clip list of the 10 clips I'm going to be using. I'm not covering the shooting, not just because of YouTube's monetization policies, where if I put that in the title or the video description or the search tags, the chance of me getting monetized is pretty low, but also because I'm waiting to see if the movement that the latest school shooting victims are trying to start actually has any political legs. The shooting victims actually, you can see 5 students from that high school in Florida in Park Lane. They appeared on all 5 of the Sunday morning big 5 corporate outlet news analysis shows. Those 5 kids you saw there did the full Ginsburg, but I won't really have much coverage of that. What I'm really going to be covering is this indictment of 13 Russian nationals for, I don't know if you would call it collusion, it's conspiracy to defraud the United States, especially conspiracy to defraud the Federal Election Commission, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. I've read the entire indictment, as I've talked about on many previous shows. I was a criminal defense attorney for a while, so I may actually commit some legal analysis at some points in this show. But as usual, like I said, I want to start off with some political comedy, and that's a short 1 minute or so clip from HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher. This is Bill Maher's monologue where he dealt with the Robert Mueller indictment, which I will talk about with you after... I don't even have... Hold on. Can't play this clip for you until... I can't listen to this clip with you until I plug in my little earphone here, which I apparently forgot to do. Okay, so now I will listen to that Bill Maher clip with you over here.
Well, the other good news, Bob Mueller indicted... This is big. I know this is a slow-moving story, the indictments, and it's like your eyes glazed. This was big today. He indicted 13 Russian nationals, 3 Russian companies for their plot to use social media to rat fuck our 2016 election. And you know how Trump always says, no collusion? It's getting close. The indictment says the Russians were in communication with unwitting individuals associated with the Trump administration. Yeah, that's the problem, unwitting. It could have been anybody, you know? But it goes into, this indictment goes into great detail about how when these Russians posed as Americans to sow discord among us, they went to great lengths to appear like they were regular, real Americans. They bought space on American web servers. They used American slang. They gained 50 pounds.
So, I mean, I like those jokes. It was a really short 1 minute set of jokes, the 50 pounds thing. I don't know, but I like the idea that just about everyone in the Trump administration, who are the people who in the Trump administration and the Trump campaign were unwitting? That's pretty much everybody. That was my favorite joke from the monologue, and so I included it as the political comedy to start the show. But the Russian investigation and the Mueller indictments, it's actually a pretty serious multi-million-dollar complex effort to influence the United States presidential election in 2016. They spent a couple years. They sent spies over here that traveled around the country. They created all these fake identities that during the campaign. I mean, it was almost like a third presidential campaign. They were spending like $1 million a month, and it did have to share coverage, like I said, this week with this Florida shooting, which may or may not create a bigger movement. Like I said, these 5 kids from the high school did appear, from the Florida shooting. They did appear on all 5 of the big 5 corporate outlets. And, I mean, maybe they will get a movement that lasts all the way through the election. It would be great if there were more young people turning out to vote in 2018, and maybe this will create more turnout with the march and the school walkouts that they're planning. But I'm going to show you some of the news summaries. They were much abbreviated. Here's the NBC Meet the Press news summary. And, normally I show how Chuck Todd does the introduction and then moves to the package. And the package is all about the school shooting, so I'm not really going to show it. But you'll see how Chuck Todd sort of puts the Russia investigation news as 2 bookends on the shooting in his live introduction. Let's do it live, as I think someone just said in the live comments. Here's Chuck Todd doing it live before the package over in this clip.
If you can remember, as far back as Tuesday, the week's news cycle began with the nation's intelligence chiefs testifying that Russia is continuing to interfere with our election systems here in 2018, and that President Trump hasn't asked them to do anything about it. Well, the week ended with Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein announcing the indictment of 13 Russians, including an oligarch close to Putin, and 3 companies for engineering an elaborate campaign to subvert the 2016 election and support the candidacy of Donald Trump using social media. But in between was the horror of another school shooting. 17 students and teachers dead at a high school in Parkland, Florida. This week's school shooting, and we have to say this week's because there are so many, prompted this Facebook post of a depressingly familiar cycle. Mass shooting, followed by calls for thoughts and prayers, Facebook debates, everyone forgets, Congress does nothing, crickets chirping, and then another mass shooting. Perhaps one reason this tragedy may be different is the determination of students and survivors at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School and elsewhere to speak out. And we're going to hear from some of those students later this hour. President Trump has seemed more obsessed with the Russia story, tweeting 13 times, including 5 times this morning, that the indictments clear him of collusion. They don't. And even suggesting that the reason the FBI missed clues about the suspect, Nicholas Cruz, was because it was too focused on trying to prove Russian collusion. So here we are as a country, grieving again and debating what to do about gun violence again, and with no agreed-upon solution again.
Thank you very much.
Your gun laws need to be changed, Mr. President.
And there you see Chuck Todd goes over to the package where he has pre-recorded his narration for a bunch of video clips about the shooting in Florida. And I already talked about that a little bit. But you saw the way that it was bookended by this whole Russia investigation, which could be the story with more legs that could actually, well, if you believe Rush Limbaugh, it could lead to the impeachment of President Trump, although that's not really something he deserves, but it's more like some nefarious plot, apparently. But I'll get to that Rush Limbaugh clip in a couple minutes. I have 2 more news summaries I want to show you. First, the CNN State of the Union news summary. It's Dana Bash saying that our state of our union is in mourning, and there's a little bit more Florida shooting coverage in here, but it also points out how Donald Trump made it all about him, and this is really like more incisive criticism of the president that he definitely deserves from his flood of tweets this morning that Dana Bash talks about. And I've actually edited together 2 different CNN clips. First, the introduction to CNN, where Dana Bash does what the State of the Union is, and then there's the introduction to her interview with Adam Schiff, and I'll show a couple clips of the Adam Schiff interview right after I show the Rush Limbaugh clip. But here's the introduction to the State of the Union, and like I said, more incisive criticism of our president and his foibles in this clip.
The state of our union is in mourning and looking for leadership in Washington. President Trump is at Mar-a-Lago facing two national crises: the murder of 17 people in yet another school shooting, and the now clear Russian attack on American democracy leading up to and since the 2016 election. In an overnight Twitter rant, the president made both serious issues about him, saying, "Very sad that the FBI missed all of the many signals sent out by the Florida school shooter. This is not acceptable. They are spending too much time trying to prove Russian collusion with the Trump campaign. There is no collusion. Get back to the basics and make us all proud." This after a day in which teenage survivors of the Parkland massacre. President Trump is on a Twitter tear, repeatedly declaring no collusion after special counsel Robert Mueller moved to indict 13 Russians for waging, quote, information warfare against Americans during the 2016 election. The president is also attacking the top Democrat on the House Russia probe, Adam Schiff, calling him a leaking monster of no control and saying Schiff is blaming the Obama administration for the Russian meddling. Well, that's not exactly right. We spoke to Congressman Schiff just before he got on a plane to travel back from the Munich Security Conference. Congressman, I want to start.
And like I said, I'm going to show a couple clips of that Adam Schiff interview where he doesn't really say what President Trump said he said, which, of course, is not surprising. And I'll have two clips of Adam Schiff in just a minute. But first, I want to show sort of the alternative universe of Fox News. I'm going to show almost a 6-minute clip of Rush Limbaugh explaining sort of the warped Earth 2 Trump TV alternative universe view of this whole Russia investigation. But first, I want to show how even the straight news on Fox News Sunday, on Fox News, which is Fox News Sunday and Chris Wallace. Supposedly, Chris Wallace is a straight news anchor, and Fox News Sunday is a straight news show. But they definitely emphasized the supposed vindication of Trump. The parts of what Rod Rosenstein, when he announced these indictments, he said that there was no evidence in the indictment of collusion and no evidence in the indictment that the outcome of the election was affected by the Russian activities in the indictment. But of course, the key words there are in the indictment, and of course that is the part that Fox News has been emphasizing over and over again since Friday, including in this introduction to their panel discussion. I won't show the panel discussion, but here's the 30-second introduction from Fox News Sunday, which sort of passes for their news summary over here.
There is no allegation in this indictment that any American was a knowing participant in this illegal activity. There is no allegation in the indictment that the charged conduct altered the outcome of the 2016 election.
Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein announcing the indictment of 13 Russian nationals and 3 companies by the special counsel, but taking pains to emphasize what is not being alleged. And we're back now with our panel.
And like I said, I'm not going to show the panel, but that, like I said, is the part that's been emphasized on Fox News over and over again, including on the supposedly straight news programs. The fact that Rod Rosenstein said, in the indictment, there's no evidence of collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians. But remember the Bill Maher joke that they were all unwitting, which pretty much describes everyone in the Trump campaign. And then there's no evidence that it affected the outcome in the indictment, but that doesn't mean it didn't affect the outcome, and that's really what they were trying to do. And the real evidence of the alternative universe, Trump TV, Earth 2 view of the Russia collusion story that I was talking about before is in this interview with Rush Limbaugh, where this is like what what's going on right-wing radio, I guess. I mean, I haven't listened to Rush Limbaugh in years. I used to listen to him years ago all the time, but He's become less and less relevant, but I guess he was doing his annual interview on Fox News Sunday, and this is his, like, his view of the whole Russia story is so around the bend that some parts of it actually go so far around that they come back to the truth, like the part that where you'll see in this answer he says, you know, Trump should be careful where he shouldn't be endorsing these indictments because Mueller has more coming, and it you know, Trump may be the target, and I think there may be some truth to that, but there's a lot of real wackiness, especially about Hillary Clinton and Obama by the end of this, almost, like I said, almost 6-minute clip from Fox News Sunday. Rush Limbaugh giving some weird, warped, alternative universe view of the Russia story over here.
This has been another one of those weeks in the Trump era with major developments in a number of areas, from an immigration deadlock in the Senate to an explosive indictment in the Russia investigation. Rush Limbaugh is back with us again to discuss it all. And Rush, as I try to explain to your listeners, if I interrupt you, it's just to move you along so we can cover more territory. So let me start with...
I have given you the...
Go ahead.
I've given you the dispensation on that. They're very much aware of this, that might happen, and you're cool.
Okay, papal dispensation.
You're gold.
Let's start with the Russia investigation and the announcement of an indictment alleging a sophisticated Russian scheme to try to interfere with the 2016 presidential election. Here's what candidate Trump said about all of this during the campaign and what the Deputy Attorney General said on Friday.
It could be Russia, but it could also be China. It could also be lots of other people. It also could be somebody sitting on their bed that weighs 400 pounds, okay?
The defendants allegedly conducted what they called information warfare against the United States, with the stated goal of spreading distrust towards the candidates and the political system in general.
Now, I want to emphasize that there is no evidence, and the Deputy Attorney General made it clear, no evidence of any collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians. But doesn't this indictment disprove what Mr. Trump has been saying all along, that any talk about the Russians is a hoax and that the special counsel investigation is a witch hunt?
I would be very careful if I were President Trump here. You know, this is just one of many different areas the special counsel is investigating. And without getting into details of this, because I think this is, everybody's trying to affect the outcome of elections, Chris, and everybody's poisoning the internet. Everybody's doing it, both parties, insane lunatic individuals. The Russians are pikers, actually, compared to Americans doing this. The problem is that it's illegal for them to do it. The danger for the president is it would be very, I think, seductive for him to embrace this, totally embrace, say, see, I've been vindicated. The worst thing he could do in his world is to validate this whole investigation by claiming victory here, because what if down the road there is another indictment or a series of indictments that do name Trump or do name the Russians and Trump campaign colluding? Because that's what this is about. This is about getting Trump, Chris. This whole thing is about setting Trump up for impeachment if the Democrats win in 2018. Donald Trump remains in the crosshairs. He is the target. And there is no let-up in that, no matter what this indictment does or doesn't say.
Let me pick up on that, because you say that the real scandal here is the effort by the Clinton campaign and the Obama administration to try to sabotage candidate Trump and now President Trump.
Oh, there's no question about it. And if you look at this indictment, and I've had people say, does this mean that Hillary could be indicted or Fusion GPS? No, because this indictment doesn't charge anybody with collusion. It says they've defrauded the United States with mail fraud and wire fraud. You can't get the Fusion GPS or steal people. The real collusion, and there's no question about this. This is a paid political opposition research document that was made to look like legitimate intelligence. It perhaps was used to defraud the FISA court.
You're talking about the Steele dossier here.
Steele dossier. and pretty much everything that they've used. I mean, every story. I was on this program 1 year ago, and I told you that this whole thing, that Trump colluded with the Russians, was bogus, that there was never going to be any evidence for it. It did not happen. Every news story about it since then has included that, just like this indictment right here. No allegation in the indictment that any American was a knowing participant, nor is there any allegation the scheme affected the outcome of the election. Bingo!
But, Rush, let me ask you. I mean,
there isn't going to be.
The president's top foreign policy advisor in the campaign in the first couple of weeks of his White House, General Michael Flynn, has pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI. So has another campaign advisor, George Papadopoulos. Aren't you at least curious to find out what they have to say?
Well, in the Flynn, I'm glad you bring that up, in the Flynn episode, we have learned since that the people that conducted the interview with Flynn, Peter Strzok, did not believe he lied. A number of other people in the FBI did not believe Flynn lied, and yet Flynn's under indictment, cops a plea for lying.
So
was Flynn told?
So wait a minute. Why do you think he pleaded guilty? I mean, it wasn't an indictment. He pleaded guilty.
Maybe he wasn't told. Well, because they had run him dry. His family was being destroyed. His financial net worth was destroyed. He was being broken. He had to stop the bleeding. But the question was, what was Flynn told by the FBI, by James Comey? Was Flynn told by the special counsel? By the way, the FBI does not believe you lied in their interview, in your interview with them. That seems to me to be crucial. And the new judge in this case, I think, is going to take that up. So I think this is all politics. And it's, Chris, it hasn't changed from the get-go. It is about protecting Hillary and Obama. Obama is the primary person being protected here because all of this spying and all of this collusion to destroy Trump happened with his knowledge and probably encouragement.
All right.
And the reason Hillary isn't charged is because that would mean Obama would have to be exposed as participating in the scheme, too.
All right. Let's move on to immigration.
And they actually covered immigration on Fox News Sunday in the clip I'm not going to show that came after that, which there was actually big immigration story, which may be a continuing story in future Sunday live clip roundups. It wasn't covered on many of the Sunday news analysis shows, probably because of the Florida shooting and the Russia indictments kind of overshadowed that. That's, you know, what we've come to expect in Trump world is that the news happens so fast that some things that happen don't even really get covered on the weekend, and immigration was one of them. But one of the things that Rush Limbaugh was saying at the end about how, you know, Flynn should have, he has to tell this new judge that nobody ever told him that the FBI didn't even think he lied to them. And the thing is, it's not that that Peter Strzok and some of the FBI agents don't think that what Flynn said wasn't true. Some of the FBI agents thought, well, maybe he just forgot what he told the Russians, and when he talked to us, we can't be sure that he knowingly told us a falsehood. Maybe he's just like, totally wiggy or whatever. I don't know, but the conclusion I draw as a former criminal defense attorney from those series of facts is the opposite of the conclusion that Rush Limbaugh drew, which is, it's means that Michael Flynn didn't do anything and they're railroading him. Well, he pled guilty, and he apparently pled guilty to like the smallest, least offensive criminal offense that he possibly could have pled guilty to, where the evidence was really scant. And the question is, why did the FBI and why did Robert Mueller let him get away with pleading guilty to something so minor where the evidence was so scant, when there's so many other things that they could have gone after him for? It means to me that Robert Mueller must have gotten quite a bit of information from Michael Flynn to let him get away with that really minor plea to almost nothing, where there was almost no evidence, which is, of course, the opposite of what Rush Limbaugh said. And Chris Wallace did kind of follow up a little bit on, asked him about Michael Flynn at least, but didn't really try to bring any real world facts and evidence into his interview with Rush Limbaugh. And you notice at the beginning of the clip, I forgot to mention, but it's kind of ridiculous how Chris Wallace was like, I apologize if I even interrupt you with questions. I don't want your, many, what are the Rush Limbaugh followers called? I can't even remember them. Ditto heads, that's right. You don't want the ditto heads on Twitter or whatever coming after Chris Wallace for, deigning to interrupt the king of all media or whatever. Whatever. Rush Limbaugh is kind of a buffoon, but they pay homage to him on Fox News and on the right wing, I guess, for no apparent reason that I can understand. But you can let me know what you think down in the comment section. And as sort of the antidote to Rush Limbaugh, now I have those two clips I promised from CNN State of the Union where Dana Bash was interviewing Democratic member of Congress Adam Schiff, who was also the ranking Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, one of the few people who's, read all the important intelligence documents. And here he is responding to Donald Trump's claim that this Mueller indictment vindicates him. And I like his line here that, Donald Trump, every time someone sneezes, he claims he's vindicated in the Russia investigation. But there's more than just that little joke. There's a good 90 seconds from CNN State of the Union, Dana Bash questioning Adam Schiff over in this clip.
I'm sure you saw that the Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein made clear on Friday that the indictment does not allege, quote, any American was a knowing participant in this illegal activity. President Trump tweeted that his campaign, quote, did nothing wrong, no collusion. Congressman, you've seen the intelligence. Do you think that this indictment suggests that it's a case closed, no collusion?
No, of course not. But this is a president who claims vindication anytime someone sneezes. What this indictment sets out is information about only one element of the Russian active measures campaign, that involving their use of social media to influence attitudes, to motivate people to protest, to essentially infiltrate our political system through the cybersphere. It doesn't contain any of the allegations that are really most known to the public, and that is the Russian hacking into democratic institutions, the Russian publishing of stolen information. Now, on that, the Trump campaign, and indeed candidate Trump himself, was very witting of what was going on. Indeed, the whole country was, when on October 7th, the intelligence community told the country, the Russians are behind this. They're behind the hacking and the dumping. But nonetheless, the campaign continued to use those products of that element of the Russian campaign.
Congressman, I have to ask about this indictment.
So I think that's a good refutation to Donald Trump's tweets about being vindicated. And like I said, there's that joke in there. And not only that, I do want to show what Adam Schiff actually said about whether he was blaming the Obama administration. You saw earlier in Dana Bash, her introduction to her interview with Adam Schiff, in a clip I previously showed, she showed the tweets from Donald Trump saying Adam Schiff is blaming Obama. He's finally, little Adam Schiff, and there were some attacks on Adam Schiff, how he's like an uncontrolled leaker, but also he's blaming Obama. And this is what Adam Schiff actually said about whether he's blaming Trump or blaming Obama for, and it's kind of ridiculous for Republicans to blame Obama for not doing more to publicize the Russian hacking and Russian attack on the election in 2016, because back in September of 2016, Obama gathered together the big eight, Democrats and Republicans who lead the Senate and the House, and tried to get a bipartisan statement together where they all talked about this Russian intervention in our election. And Mitch McConnell said, no, we will not go, Republicans are not going along with this, and if you talk about this, we're going to say it's a partisan attack on Donald Trump and you're trying to help Hillary get elected. And so, I mean, that's also kind of what Adam Schiff talks about, the partisan nature of what was going on back in 2016 in response to a question from Dana Bash about that issue over here.
Ask about this indictment because it says that Russian interference has been going on since 2014. That was halfway through the president's second term, President Obama's second term. Do you believe that President Obama and his administration bear some responsibility for not stopping this well before the 2016 presidential election?
I've said all along that I thought the Obama administration should have done more, and indeed when we discovered and we could attribute the conduct to Russia, Senator Feinstein and I took the first steps to make public attribution, because at that time we couldn't get the Obama administration to acknowledge the Russian interference. They were very wary of appearing to be putting their hand on the scale in the election. Now, they did make an acknowledgement the following month, but I don't think that was sufficient. I think they should have engaged in conversations about sanctions at that time. But none of that is an excuse for this president to sit on his hands. It is inexplicable that the President of the United States continues to sit on sanctions that Congress passed, that Congress wants to enforce against Russia over this interference. So they can't point the finger back when they're sitting on sanctions that the Congress, on a very bipartisan basis, has said need to be imposed.
Congressman, I want to turn to the...
So that's what Adam Schiff actually said, and it does fault the Obama administration somewhat for not publicizing this attack more, but it's not really a vindication for Trump, and Trump shouldn't really be citing Adam Schiff as someone saying, you know, blame Obama, don't blame Trump for Russia collusion. And, well, I mean, you just saw that clip yourself. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. And speaking of whether we should blame Obama for not doing more, over on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, the permanent co-host Martha Raddatz had on the Secretary of Homeland Security at the end of the Obama administration, Jeh Johnson, and she could have asked him about whether Obama could have done more, but she never did. Instead, she asked about what we could do to stop Russians or bad actors from going after our political system using Facebook and other social media. And Jeh Johnson talks about it and talks about balancing it against First Amendment interests, but then you'll see the follow-up questions about the Florida shooting. Never any question about the Obama administration not doing enough to publicize the Russian hacking and Russian social media penetration during the 2016 election, in this clip from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos this morning over here.
And Secretary Johnson, a major part of the Russian influence operation involved Facebook, Instagram, Twitter accounts. Is it time to take a harder look at that and regulate that more?
Well, first, Martha, thanks for having me on. I have to say, looking at the images of Parkland, Florida, as a father and an American, they are truly painful, and there are no words to adequately express our condolences, and I'm sure my friend Chris Christie agrees with that. With regard to Russia, you are correct that it's time for action. Chris is correct that it's time for action. President Trump's own intelligence chiefs have pointed out that we're in the midst now, in connection with the 2018 midterms, in another campaign to try to influence our democracy. When it comes to Facebook and social media and speech that appears on social media, I think that the security agencies of our government need to be very careful in trying to delve into this whole topic. I think that the answer has to be that those that provide access on the internet do more to self-regulate, to do more to make attribution to those who gain access to the information marketplace, because we are a society of free speech, and we need to be careful not to get security agencies of our government involved in regulating free speech.
And Secretary Johnson, I do want to turn back to these terrible, tragic shootings, and I want to ask you about the
And so you can see the follow-up there from Martha Raddatz had to do with the shootings in Florida. Nothing about the Obama administration responsibility for not taking stronger action or stronger public statements about the Russian interference in our election. That would be my criticism of Martha Raddatz and ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. I mean, the answer otherwise was, you know, good as far as it goes, but, you know, certainly not as useful as an answer to that question. So that's why I wanted to show you that clip. I have two more clips I want to show you. I did want to thank my live viewers along the way. I noticed I've gotten a couple of the super chat contributions that actually usually are more than the ad revenue I get for my videos. Or if I get super chat contributions, they give me more revenue than the advertising a lot of weeks. Here's Are those two different people with the same name, two different Jose's? That's quite a coincidence. I guess I'm a information source for multiple Jose's around the world, or I don't know what to make of that, but I appreciate the super chat contributions. I appreciate my patrons on Patreon who support me month after month. Down in the video description there's a link to my Patreon page. I do have a new goal. If I get up to $1,000 a month on Patreon, then I might start covering school shootings and, you know, whatever I want to cover, because I don't have to worry about YouTube advertising. I already, if I really wanted to talk about it, I would talk about it. I'm not sure I have that much to say about it, but I do always include in my calculations as to what to talk about, the whole stupid monetization policy on YouTube. And if I were to get to that level on my Patreon account, I wouldn't have to worry about YouTube advertising anymore. I noticed my biggest Patreon contributor doubled the Patreon contribution. If like all my Patreon patrons did that, then that would automatically get me over the new goal. But also if I got, like 5 or 10 or maybe 20 new patrons, that could do it. I don't know. Well, I just wanted to mention that before I get to my last two clips, which are both Democrats who apparently were... First, there's Bernie Sanders, who was apparently a recipient of aid, or not really, but a recipient of some kind of social media push from these Russian bad actors who were indicted. And then I'll have John Podesta, who was definitely a victim of Russian hacking, as the final clip from Face the Nation. But first, and they're both about 3 minutes. This is almost exactly 3 minutes, this Meet the Press clip with Bernie Sanders. Then it's actually almost 3.5 minutes, the Face the Nation clip at the end of John Podesta. And the John Podesta clip at the end, it has the follow-up question from the current host of, this week's host of Face the Nation, Nancy Cordes. There is this total, it was like the biggest diss, or biggest, I don't know what you would call it, it was like a huge body blow question in the follow-up question from Nancy Cordes. So hold on for that final clip. But here's Bernie Sanders talking to Chuck Todd on Meet the Press about the way that Russians might have flooded his Facebook page with fake Russian support. And Bernie Sanders says, we didn't really learn anything new, and I will talk about that with you after we watch that clip together over here.
The conversation going here. Your campaign, perhaps these Russians were told to leave it alone, that the only people that they were not to criticize were Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders. I'm curious, did anybody in your campaign get interviewed by Mueller to just make sure your campaign had nothing to do with this?
No, to the best of my knowledge, nobody in our campaign was interviewed. Mueller mentioned me twice, our campaign, twice in his report. And I think what he was talking about is kind of old news. It's what most Americans know, is that at the end of my campaign, when it appeared that Clinton was going to win, and certainly after she won the nomination, what the Russians were doing is flocking to Bernie Sanders' Facebook sites, and they were saying to Bernie Sanders supporters, as they were, by the way, to Black Lives Matter supporters, people who are fighting for social justice, as they were saying to the Muslim community, if you voted for Sanders, you have to understand Hillary Clinton is crazy, she's a murderer, she is terrible, all kinds of horrible, horrible things about Hillary Clinton. And it turns out that one of our social media guys in San Diego actually went to the Clinton campaign in September and said something weird is going on. Bernie's not in the campaign. Hundreds of these people are now coming onto his Facebook site. So I think we already knew that. It was an effort to undermine American democracy and to really say horrible things about Secretary Clinton.
Do you have an idea of how to prevent this going forward? I mean, this was a sophisticated, they basically used the divide of the Democratic Party between you and Secretary Clinton at the time to polarize things even more.
Right. Look, first of all, the main point to be understood is that what everybody understands, except Donald Trump, is that this was not just the 2016 campaign. They intend to do this in 2018. And I think one of the weirdest things in modern American history is you have every intelligence agency, you have the Mueller report, you have Trump's own administration saying the Republicans want to sabotage the 2018 campaign. Everybody knows this except the President of the United States.
Yeah.
And I think people are asking, what is going on with this president? What we have got to do, and I think Senator Langford touched on some of the issues, front end. What we have got to say to the Russians, you are doing something to undermine American democracy. You are not going to get away with it. This is a major assault. If you do that, there will be severe, severe consequences.
Right.
We've got to protect states and communities to make sure that their voting is not compromised.
Adam Schiff, the lead Democrat in the House.
So, I don't know. Do you think that Bernie Sanders is guilty of collusion? I don't really think there's any evidence of that. And what he's saying definitely makes sense about how they were just trying to foment dissent and polarization, and that a lot of the Russian intervention on his Facebook page came at basically when his campaign was dead, and they were just trying to create division in the Democratic Party. But you can let me know what you think about that down in the comment section. I noticed I got a super chat contribution, $200 from My Earth without any additional comment, but I really appreciate that after begging for contributions because of the bad YouTube advertising revenue that I get from my, it's basically like $15 per show, or if I'm lucky, a little more than that. But so that really gives me hope that I can continue doing this as a regular Sunday show, as I have for the last 252 weeks. And now Sandy is getting restless over there. I have a bonus Sandy clip. I forgot to play the bonus Sandy clip last week. So this week I not only have a bonus Sandy clip, but there's a rare Dash sighting. Dash is, I have a dog and a cat, so for the cat people and the dog people out there, there will be a bonus clip at the end. But before I get to the bonus clip, I have one more news clip. This is John Podesta talking to Nancy Cordes over on CBS's Face the Nation. I think in some ways refuting the idea that there was no effect on the outcome of the election, which is what some of the Republicans were trying to claim based on this Russia indictment. John Podesta, I think, knows that pretty clearly, that there was some effect. And then, like I said before I showed the previous clip, Nancy Cordes, the current, this week's host of Face the Nation, this is like the most cutting follow-up question about, well, I won't give it away, no spoilers, but this is like the most cutting follow-up question of the week. This may be my favorite follow-up question of the entire month from Nancy Cordes. It's brutal follow-up question to John Podesta in the final clip for tonight before the bonus Sandy Dash clip at the end. Here's Face the Nation on CBS This Morning over here.
Deputy Attorney General was very careful on Friday to say that we don't know whether or not this operation swayed the election. You've had a lot of time to think about this. Where do you come down on that issue?
Well, look, this was one part of a complex, active interference in the measures. This didn't even deal with the hacking. This was only about what was going on in the social media and the information campaign that was being done there. But there were 80 people, millions of dollars spent. And as one of your previous guests, Senator Coons, noted, we won the popular vote by 3 million votes. They were pushing votes, just to give one example, to Jill Stein. Her vote in Michigan, in Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin was greater than the gap between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton in those states. So you can't prove that it did affect the outcome, but it certainly seems likely that it had some impact.
But it does beg the question, how is it that these Russian operatives knew to focus on purple states like Michigan and Wisconsin, and your campaign didn't?
Well, of course, we spent a lot of time and energy and effort in all those states.
Hillary Clinton herself did not spend much time in those states.
You know, we had Tim Kaine was there, Barack Obama was in, and she spent enormous time in Pennsylvania and Michigan.
Sure.
And we spent a lot of effort. We had more staff in Wisconsin than even President Obama had in 2012. But I think that begs the question. I think we focused on the places we thought were that were, you know, in contest, and in the end of the day, we fell short in those states. And I think that this active measures effort by the Russians could have tilted the election in Donald Trump's favor. But I think what the real issue is you know, how he's reacted to it. And in that context, if this is information warfare, then I think he's the first draft dodger in the war. I mean, he has done nothing but tried to undermine the Mueller investigation. He hasn't implemented the sanctions that was passed by the Congress and that he signed in reaction to the activities in the 2016 election. We learned this week he's ordered no effort to try to get the intelligence community to get together to try to prevent further activities in the 2018 election.
Why do you think that is? Do you think that it's because to do so would be to admit that somehow the Russians might have influenced this election?
Well, you know, I think that Mr. Trump's psyche is complicated, and people have said a lot about it. But he certainly can't accept that this activity may have helped him, and I think he just constantly tries to move the ball away, including what was, I think, really a despicable tweet about the fact that he's blaming the FBI for investigating the Russia investigation and somehow relating that to the tragic killings in Florida. But, you know, who knows with Mr. Trump, but he clearly, I think, has failed in carrying out his duty as President of the United States, which is to protect our democracy.
Midterm elections are coming up, and it's been...
You gotta love that Nancy Cordes follow-up question there. You know, how come the Russians knew to focus on Michigan and Wisconsin, but Hillary Clinton never went there, but your campaign didn't? And then when he's claimed, well, you know, we did all this stuff, well, Hillary Clinton never went to Wisconsin, and I don't think John Podesta was ready for that follow-up question, and that was brutal. It was brutal, but it was very incisive, and I have to give kudos to Nancy Cordes for coming up with that follow-up question. And I don't know, I guess John Podesta kind of recovered with that whole, like, if, you know, this is Russian information warfare, then Donald Trump is the first draft dodger in this information war. But I guess Donald Trump is a draft dodger in any information war because he's, you know, sort of the low information voter president. I don't know. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. But that's the final clip. Like I said, I covered the Russia Mueller indictment and what it may be showing for the future of the Russia investigation. The one thing I wanted to point out when I promised to commit legal analysis is if you actually read the 37-page indictment at the link down in the video description, you'll see that Robert Mueller didn't indict all these Russians for violating the federal statute that I've been citing down in the video description for many, many months about foreign nationals are prohibited from contributing anything of value to a federal election. Instead of indicting the Russian nationals for violating that statute, he violated them for a conspiracy to defraud the United States, including defrauding the Federal Election Commission by not letting them know that foreign nationals were contributing to these federal elections, which is like a level above. It's what it does is it lets them bypass some of the possible flaws in these federal election laws, and of course the enforcement from the Federal Election Commission is pretty much non-existent because it's deadlocked by partisan disagreements, and there's a possibility that some of these laws might not be enforceable, but Robert Mueller bypassed all that by creating this conspiracy to defraud the United States by not even letting the Federal Election Commission and these other federal regulatory agencies from looking into what the Russians were doing in the 2016 election. So that's something to really look at. It's like this important legal theory, I guess, the Mueller investigation has come up with that is going to be really important when I cover the impeachment. If I keep getting contributions from my Patreon patrons, and from there's also a link down in the video description to a PayPal direct contribution. It's like paypal.me/LiberalViewer. You can contribute that way, and then I've got great super chat contributions this week. So I think I'm going to be around to cover the impeachment, and what I'm talking about is going to be really important for the impeachment when the additional shoes drop on this whole Russia investigation. So stay tuned for that, and stay tuned next Sunday when I will be back with another Liberal Viewer Sunday live clip roundup, and every week for the foreseeable future. And I appreciate all of you who joined me for the live show, and my recorded viewers. Give me a thumbs up down there, and give me a supportive comment in the comment section. And if you keep doing that and keep supporting me, I will keep coming back with my fair use media analysis and political analysis and media criticism every week. And until next week, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.